The refugee dock on Station Kethrai smelled like ozone and boiled protein cakes. That smell never left the place, not even after the cleaning drones passed through 3 times a day. It stuck to your clothes, your hair, even your breath. I had been living on that station for almost 2 years, working maintenance shifts on the lower deck, and by then the smell did not bother me anymore. What bothered me that day was something else. I saw her sitting against a cargo crate at the edge of the ration line. She was a Vilith, one of the dragonkin people, with scales the color of dried rust and wings folded so tightly against her back that they looked stitched there. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, and her tail curled around her feet like she was trying to take up as little space in the universe as possible. She did not look at anyone. She just stared at the floor, her eyes half closed, like she was trying to disappear. The line moved slowly that day. A pair of Crystal traders walked past her, laughing. One of them flicked a half-eaten ration bar into the recycling chute, making sure she saw him waste it right in front of her. She did not react. She just kept staring at the floor. "Fire lizards don't get rations," a voice said behind me. It was one of the dock workers, a heavy-set man named Doran who worked the loading bay. "Ship's not carrying enough food for everyone. Priority goes to species that actually contribute something." I had heard this rumor already. It had been passed from person to person like a bad coin, growing a little uglier each time it changed hands. The story was that the Vilith colony ships had been destroyed while defending a human convoy 2 systems away. Half the survivors who made it to Kethrai were dragonkin, and half the station, it seemed, had decided that made them a burden instead of guests who deserved thanks. I looked down at my tray. Synth rice, a strip of grilled vat protein, and a roll that was more air than bread. It was not much. It was barely enough for one stomach, and mine had been growling since the last shift bell rang. But something about the way she sat there, ignored and mocked at the same time, made me walk over and sit down in the dust in front of her. She flinched, like I had raised a hand to strike her. Up close, I could see how thin she was under those scales. There were hollow places at her collarbone, and her hands trembled slightly, the kind of shake that comes from hunger, not cold. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "I thought you might want half of this. It's not much, but it's food." She stared at the tray, then at me, then back at the tray, as if she was waiting for a trick. I understood why she waited. I split the bread roll in 2, placed half on the crate lid between us, and began eating like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like I had not just given away part of my own meal to a stranger who had been mocked only minutes earlier. "Why?" she said finally. Her voice came out rough, like it had not been used in days. "They say we are dead. Mouths, nothing more." "They're wrong," I said, nudging the tray a little closer to her side. "You bled for people you had never even met before. That is not debt. That is one of the best things I have ever heard about anyone, and I include humans in that." She almost laughed at that, a small huff of air that might have been the beginning of a smile. Then she picked up the bread like it might vanish if she moved too quickly, and ate it in 2 bites. "My name is Ren Calder. I want to tell you the rest of what happened after that day, because it did not end there. It was only the beginning." Her name was Asharel. I learned that the next morning, when I saw her again near the same crate, though this time she was standing instead of sitting on the floor. She looked a little steadier, though still thin, still cautious. When she saw me, she did not run, and she did not look away either. She simply watched me the way someone watches a door they are not sure will open again. "You came back," she said. "I work near here," I told her. "Maintenance shift. I walk past this dock every day. You gave me food yesterday." I did. Humans do not usually do that, not for us. I did not have a good answer for that, so I just shrugged. Some do, some don't. I try to be one of the ones who do. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes narrow and careful, the kind of look that comes from someone who has been hurt enough times to be careful about trusting anyone new. Then she nodded, just once, like she had decided something important. Over the following days, I started noticing her more. She sat near the same crate every morning, waiting for the ration line to open. And every morning a few people would walk past and say something unkind, whether in words or simply in the way they turned their heads away from her, as if she were something dirty rather than someone worth seeing. I began sitting with her before my shift, sharing whatever small piece of food I could spare. It was never much, a roll, a protein strip, sometimes just water, when I had nothing else to give. Word travels fast on a station that small. By the end of the first week, I was not the only one sitting with her. A woman named Priya, who worked in the medical bay, started bringing an extra ration each morning and leaving it beside Asharel without a word. then walking away before anyone could ask questions. A young man named Tobias, who worked engineering with me, began doing the same. It was not organized. Nobody called a meeting or made an announcement. It simply happened, the way small kindnesses tend to spread when people see them done and realize they can do the same thing. Not everyone liked this. Doran, the loading bay worker who had complained about fire lizards not deserving rations, started making comments whenever he saw us together. He called it a waste of good food. He said the Vilith should have stayed to defend their own ships instead of getting in the way of the human convoy, as if she and her people had chosen to have their homes destroyed. I never argued with him directly. Arguing with someone who has already decided not to listen rarely changes anything. Instead, I just kept sitting with Asharel every morning, kept sharing what I had, and let my actions speak instead of my words. One morning, about 2 weeks after we first met, Asharel told me a little about what had happened to her people. She spoke slowly, like each word cost her something. We were 3 ships, she said. Colony ships, carrying families, elders, children who had never even seen open sky before. We were traveling through the Vesa corridor when we found your convoy under attack. Pirates. Many of them, well armed. You didn't have to help, I said quietly. We could not just watch, she said, and there was something fierce in her voice even though her body still looked so tired. Your people were outnumbered. We had shields. We had weapons, though not many. We used what we had to protect the convoy long enough for your ships to escape. And your ships? She was quiet for a moment. 2 were destroyed. Mine survived, barely. We lost many people. Elders, children. My own sister was among them. I did not know what to say to that. Sometimes there is nothing good enough to say, and the only right thing to do is stay quiet and let the person speak if they want to keep speaking, or let them rest if they do not. When we arrived here, she continued, we thought we would be welcomed. Instead, we are called burdens, mouths that eat food meant for others. Nobody asks what we lost, they only ask what we cost. I'm sorry, I said. It felt small, but it was true. And sometimes true and small is better than large and empty. You did not do this, she said. You are the reason I still believe some of you are worth trusting. That conversation stayed with me for a long time. I began asking around the station, quietly, about how the Vilith refugees were actually being treated. What I learned made me angry in a way I had not expected. The rumor that the ship could not carry enough food for everyone was not entirely true. There was enough food. It was simply being distributed unevenly, with human passengers receiving full rations while Vilith refugees received partial ones, sometimes none at all, under the excuse of logistics. Nobody had officially decided this. It had simply happened, the way unfairness often happens, through small choices made by people who did not think anyone would notice or care. I brought this to the station's quartermaster, a stern woman named Elena Voss who ran supply distribution for the entire dock. I was nervous walking into her office, because I was nobody important, just a maintenance worker with no authority to change anything. But I told her what I had seen and what I had learned, and I asked her directly why the rations were being split unevenly. She looked at me for a long moment before answering. You're the one who's been sharing your meals with the dragon girl, she said. It was not a question. Her name is Asharel, I said. And yes, you know that's not going to fix the supply problem. Maybe not. But it's not right that some people get full meals and others get scraps, especially when those people bled for us. I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm asking you to look at the numbers again, really look. She studied me for a long moment, and I thought she might simply dismiss me and send me back to my shift. Instead, she sighed and pulled up a display on her desk, scrolling through supply reports. There's more here than people realize, she admitted after a while. The reports were written to make it look tighter than it is. Someone along the chain decided to pad the numbers, probably to justify cutting corners on refugee support without drawing attention to it. Can you fix that? I can look into it, she said. That's all I'll promise you right now, no guarantees. It was not a full victory, but it was something. Over the following days, small changes started happening. An extra supply crate was quietly rerouted to the Vilith section of the dock. Nobody made an announcement about it. Elena Voss simply adjusted the numbers, muttering something about correcting a logistics error, and let the extra food appear without fanfare. It was not everything Asharel and her people deserved, but it was more than they had been given before, and it was a start. Asharel noticed the change before I told her about it. There is more food this week, she said one morning, sitting a little straighter than usual. I noticed too, I said, keeping my voice casual, though I felt a small flush of pride. She looked at me carefully, the way she often did when she suspected I knew more than I was saying. "Did you do something, Ren?" "I asked a question," I said. "That's all. Someone else did the actual work of fixing it." She did not push further, but I could tell from the way she looked at me that she understood exactly what had happened, and that she was grateful even though she did not say the words directly. Some kinds of gratitude do not need to be spoken. They live in a look, a small nod, the way someone sits a little closer than they used to. As weeks passed, Asharel grew stronger. The hollow places at her collarbone filled in slowly. Her wings, once folded so tightly against her back, began to loosen, though I learned later that this was partly because they were healing from an injury she had suffered during the battle that destroyed her ship. She never told me the full details of that injury, only that it had been serious enough that the station's medical staff were surprised she could still use her wings at all. One afternoon, she asked if I wanted to see her fly. I had not realized flying was even possible inside the station's dock, since the ceilings were low and the space was crowded with cargo and workers. But she led me to a wide storage bay near the edge of the refugee section, a place that had been cleared out to store crates that had since been moved elsewhere. The bay had a high ceiling, tall enough for her to stretch her wings fully for the first time since I had known her. Watching her fly, even in that small space, was something I will not forget. Her wings, once folded so tightly they looked stitched to her back, spread wide and caught the air in a way that looked almost effortless, though I could tell from the tension in her shoulders that it still took real effort and real courage, given how recently she had been injured. She circled the bay twice, landed gently, and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her before. It looked like joy, plain and simple, the kind of joy that comes rarely to someone who has lost as much as she had. "That was the first time I have flown since the battle," she said, a little breathless. "You looked amazing," I told her, and I meant it completely. "Thank you for being here to see it," she said. Not every day was easy after that. Doran and a few others still made comments whenever they saw us together, and there were moments when Asharel grew quiet and distant, clearly thinking about the family she had lost. Grief does not disappear just because good things start happening. It simply sits alongside the good things, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, and you learn to carry both together. I tried to be patient during those quiet moments, sitting with her without pushing her to talk, letting her decide when she wanted to share and when she simply wanted company. About 2 months after we first met, Asharel was offered a position as an assistant in the quartermaster's office. Elena Voss, the same stern woman who had listened to my concerns weeks earlier, had noticed how carefully Asharel tracked the small details of supply distribution during the time she helped organize the ration line for her own people. It was a small job, nothing glamorous, but it was steady work, and more importantly, it was proof that the station was beginning to see her as someone who could contribute, rather than simply someone who needed help. "I did not expect this," Asharel told me the day she received the offer. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the small data tablet with the job details displayed on it, though this time the trembling was not from hunger. "You earned it," I said. "You've been running that ration line better than anyone else for weeks. Everyone can see it, even the people who don't want to admit it. Some still do not want me here," she said quietly. "Some people will never change their minds no matter what you do," I told her. "But that doesn't mean you stop trying to build something good. It just means you build it with the people who are willing to stand beside you." She took the job. Within a month, the ration distribution across the entire dock had become noticeably more organized, with fewer complaints and less waste. People who had once mocked her for needing food began asking her for help figuring out supply schedules, though few of them ever thanked her directly for it. She did not seem to need their thanks. She simply did the work well, day after day, and let that work speak for itself. I want to tell you about one more moment before I finish this story, because I think it matters more than anything else I have shared so far. About 4 months after we first met, the station held a small memorial gathering for everyone who had lost family members during the pirate attack on the convoy, both human and Vilith. It was not a large event, just a quiet ceremony held in one of the station's common areas with candles and simple recorded words honoring those who had died. Asharel stood at the front during part of the ceremony, speaking about her sister and the others from her ship who had not survived. Her voice shook at times, but she did not stop speaking. When she finished, there was a long silence, and then, slowly, people began to approach her, one by one, offering quiet words of comfort. Even Doran approached her that day, though he said very little, just a short sentence about being sorry for her loss. It was not a full apology for everything he had said before, but it was something, and sometimes something is enough to begin repairing what was broken. I stood near the back of the room during the ceremony, watching this scene unfold, and I thought about the day I first saw her sitting alone against that cargo crate, ignored and mocked by everyone who passed. I thought about how much had changed since then, not because of one single grand gesture, but because of many small choices made day after day by ordinary people who decided that kindness was worth the effort, even when it cost them something. After the ceremony, Asharel found me near the door. "Thank you for being there," she said. "I wouldn't have missed it," I told her. "Do you remember the first time we spoke? You asked why I was surprised that you shared your food with me. I remember." "I think I understand the answer now," she said. "It is not that all humans are kind. It is that enough of you choose to be kind, even when it would be easier not to. That is what makes the difference." I did not have a clever response to that. I simply nodded, because she was right, and there was nothing more useful to add. Asharel still works in the quartermaster's office today. Her wings have fully healed, though she rarely flies inside the station anymore, saving that joy for the rare occasions when larger cargo bays are empty enough to allow it. She still sits with me sometimes during meal breaks, though now it is often her sharing extra food with newer refugees who arrive on the station looking as lost and hungry as she once did. She tells me it feels right to pass along what was given to her. I am not a hero in this story. I did not fix the unfair supply reports on my own, and I certainly did not end unkindness on the entire station. What I did was small. I sat down beside someone who needed a friend, and I shared what little food I had. But I have learned that small actions, repeated often enough and joined by enough other people willing to do the same, can grow into something larger than anyone expected. A shared meal became a shared workplace. A single act of kindness became a habit that spread through an entire dock. A stranger became someone I am proud to call a friend. If there is one thing I want anyone reading this to remember, it is simply this. When you see someone hungry, alone, or mocked for needing help, you do not need permission or a perfect plan to do something about it. You only need to sit down, share what you have, and ask questions later. The rest, more often than you might expect, tends to work itself out, one small choice at a time.